Please be advised, this story contains themes of intense psychological mystery and unsettling events that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. It began not with a bang, nor with a whisper, but with a hum. A low, resonant thrumming that vibrated through the very soles of their boots, rattling the coffee mugs in the remote Alaskan research station, known only as Outpost Borealis. For days, perhaps even weeks, it had been a subtle presence, easily dismissed as the endless groans and shifts of the immense glacier upon which their lives were precariously perched. But then it grew. Not into a roar, but something far more insidious. A deep rhythmic pulse, like the slow, deliberate beat of a colossal hidden heart. Dr. Sarah Miller, a glaciologist whose entire professional life revolved around understanding the nuances of ice, was the first to truly grasp its unnaturalness. Sarah was a woman of meticulous observation, her mind a finely tuned instrument for detecting anomalies in the frozen world. She'd spent years studying the intricate acoustics of glaciers, the way they sighed, cracked, and calved. This sound, though, was unlike anything she had ever cataloged. It wasn't the spontaneous, chaotic symphony of geological forces. This was deliberate. It had a pattern, a cadence that felt almost intentional. Outpost Borealis was a speck of human endeavor swallowed by a vast, indifferent wilderness. Miles of unforgiving ice stretched in every direction, punctuated by jagged peaks that seemed to tear at the perpetually twilight sky. Winter had descended with its usual brutal efficiency, locking them in a frigid embrace where the sun was a distant memory and the wind a constant, predatory howl. The crew, a tight-knit group of 5 scientists and technicians, had been chosen for their resilience, their specialized skills, and perhaps their tolerance for extreme isolation. They were, in essence, the farthest flung frontier of human curiosity. Initially, the crew tried to rationalize it. Dr. Ben Carter, the station's lead geologist, theorized deep seismic activity, a newly awakened fault line beneath the continental shelf. Mike Johnson, the seasoned engineer responsible for keeping their life support systems humming, suggested a strange resonance from the massive ice drill, even when it was offline. Emily Chan, their communications specialist, half-jokingly wondered if it was a rogue whale song, amplified and distorted by the immense water column beneath the glacier. But Sarah knew better. She had deployed hydrophones deep into the subglacial lake, sensitive enough to pick up the faintest tremor. The data she was receiving was confounding. The sound wasn't traveling through the ice. It was emanating from below it, with an astonishing uniformity. The hum wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. It seeped into their dreams, twisting them into fractured nightmares of endless tunnels and suffocating depths. It became the unspoken 6th member of their isolated team. Conversation grew strained, punctuated by the persistent, low-frequency thrum. Sleep became a luxury, then a torment. The constant vibration, subtle yet pervasive, grated on their nerves, fraying the edges of their sanity. Arguments flared over trivial matters, quickly extinguished by a shared, uncomfortable silence. Everyone felt it, the creeping tendrils of dread, the unsettling certainty that they were no longer alone in the desolate expanse. Sarah spent her waking hours hunched over her instruments, a frown etched permanently onto her brow. Her monitors, usually displaying the predictable undulations of ice movement and seismic tremors, now painted a stark, alien picture. A single dominant frequency pulsed across her spectrum analyzer, unwavering, powerful, and utterly unidentifiable. She ran simulations, cross-referenced databases, even consulted old, obscure texts on geological phenomena. Nothing matched. This wasn't the earth groaning. This wasn't the ocean singing. This was something else. Something manufactured, yet impossibly vast. One frigid afternoon, as the perpetual twilight outside deepened into a bruised purple, Sarah called an emergency meeting. The tension in the small, cramped common room was palpable, thick with unspoken anxieties. Ben, usually so self-assured, looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. Mike, ever practical, fidgeted with a loose cable. Even Emily, usually a beacon of calm, gnawed on her lip, her gaze distant. "The sound," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's not geological, and it's not biological. I've ruled out every known natural phenomenon. My hydrophones are picking it up directly from the subglacial lake, thousands of feet beneath us. It's a pure, sustained frequency, unlike anything I've ever recorded. It has a rhythm, a pulse, almost like it's breathing." Ben scoffed, "A nervous habit." "Breathing? Sarah, we're talking about a sound coming from under 2 miles of ice. What do you suggest? A giant slumbering creature from a Jules Verne novel? I don't know what it is, Ben, Sarah retorted, her patience wearing thin. But I know what it isn't. And what it isn't is anything we understand. Furthermore, she continued, pushing a stack of printouts across the table, the frequency is starting to modulate. It's changing. Slowly, subtly, but it's changing. It's almost like it's trying to communicate. A shiver ran through the room, despite the station's robust heating. The idea of the sound being a form of communication, a vast alien language rumbling from the abyss, was far more terrifying than any seismic event. It implied intelligence. It implied presence. Communicate what? Mike asked, his voice barely a whisper. A warning. Or an invitation, Emily murmured, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. The implications were staggering. They were a handful of people, isolated at the very edge of human civilization, listening to something utterly unknown, something ancient and immense, stirring beneath the ice. The hum, which had once been merely an annoyance, now felt like a living entity, pressing in on them, probing their fragile sanctuary. Sarah looked at each of them, her gaze firm. We can't ignore this. It's escalating. My instruments show the intensity increasing daily. We need to go down. We need to see what's making that sound. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the persistent, low thrumming that seemed to emanate not just from beneath the ice, but from the very air around them. Go down? Into the crushing darkness, into the unfathomable depths beneath the world's largest ice sheet, towards a sound that defied all reason? It was a suicide mission, a descent into the unknown. But the alternative, to simply wait, to let the sound grow, to let it consume them from the outside in, felt even worse. The hum was no longer a distant phenomenon. It was here with them, in their bones, in their very minds. And it was calling. The air in the station, usually thick with the hum of generators and the clatter of equipment, was now dominated by it. It throbbed, a low resonant drone that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, vibrating directly against their skulls, rattling their teeth, making their very muscles twitch. Fear, cold and sharp as the ice outside, settled in their chests, a primal dread that whispered of something ancient and vast stirring in the frozen depths. David Miller, the lead climatologist, usually a pillar of unflappable logic, found himself pacing the cramped common room, his footsteps heavy against the metal floor. His brow was furrowed, a deep canyon etched between his eyes, reflecting the struggle within. He'd seen blizzards that could tear steel, whiteouts that swallowed the world whole, but nothing had ever shaken him like this pervasive internal sound. He ran a hand over his bald head, his gaze distant, fixed on some unseen horror beyond the reinforced walls. Emily Carter, the team's geophysicist, sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface, pulling up seismic data, acoustic readings, anything that might offer a rational explanation. Her usually meticulous ponytail had come undone, strands of dark hair framing a face pale with exhaustion and a dawning terror. She was a woman who lived by data, by verifiable facts, but the numbers she was seeing now were a chaotic symphony of anomalies, defying every known scientific principle. The hum wasn't just a sound wave. It was a force bending reality around itself. She could feel it in her bones, a deep, persistent vibration that made her stomach churn. Mark Johnson, the youngest member of the team, a fresh-faced research assistant barely out of grad school, was curled in a corner, knees drawn to his chest. His wide eyes, usually bright with curiosity, were now glazed over, darting nervously around the room as if expecting something to materialize from the shadows. He clutched a worn paperback, but his gaze was fixed on nothing, lost in the oppressive drone. He murmured something unintelligible every now and then, a desperate attempt to find a voice amidst the overwhelming silence of his own thoughts, which the hum seemed to have consumed. Jessica Riley, the station's medic and survival expert, was the only one who seemed to retain a semblance of composure, though her jaw was clenched tight, a muscle ticking rhythmically in her cheek. She moved with purpose, checking supplies, ensuring their emergency kits were fully stocked, a practical response to an utterly impractical threat. But even her seasoned resolve was fraying. She'd seen men break under extreme conditions, under the brutal isolation of the poles, but this was different. This wasn't just the environment. It was an invasion, a psychological siege waged by an invisible enemy. The hum resonated with her own heartbeat, making her feel as if her very core was being slowly, inexorably pulled apart. They finally convened around the central table, the hum vibrating through the metal, through their very chairs. The silence between their words was louder than any shout, filled with the pervasive drone. "The seismic readings are off the charts," Emily began, her voice strained, cutting through the hum with effort. "Not in magnitude but in pattern. It's not a natural tremor. It's rhythmic, consistent, like a heartbeat but on an impossible scale." She pointed to a shimmering graph on the screen David had projected. "And the frequency signature. It's unlike anything I've ever recorded. It fluctuates, but there's a core resonance that's deep. Unfathomably deep. Unfathomably deep and getting stronger," David finished, his voice grim. "It's not just a sound anymore, Emily. We all feel it. It's inside us. It's calling." Mark whimpered, shrinking further into himself. "It wants us to come down. I hear it. It's telling me to go to the ice." His words were barely audible, slurred with fear and the overwhelming mental pressure. Jessica knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Mark, focus. It's just sound. It's playing tricks on your mind." But even as she spoke the words, she felt the lie in them. The hum was not just sound. It was an entity, a will pressing against their consciousness. "He's not entirely wrong, Jess," David admitted, running a hand over his face. "We're all feeling it. That compulsion. That pull. It's not just an auditory phenomenon, it's psychoacoustic. It's affecting our limbic systems, our decision-making. It's designed to draw us in." "Designed?" Emily scoffed, a flicker of her scientific skepticism returning, even as her body trembled. "By what? A geological anomaly with a mischievous streak? There has to be a scientific explanation. A geological process, a unique resonance chamber in the ice, something subterranean we've never encountered before." "Then what explains the calling?" David challenged, his voice rising above the drone. "What explains Mark's delusions? What explains the dreams we've all been having? The ones where we're sinking, pulled down into the freezing black, but not drowning, just merging." A shiver went through the room. They had all had them. Unspoken terrors that now found voice in David's words. Dreams of an impossible vastness beneath their feet, of being absorbed into something ancient and impossibly cold, yet strangely comforting. "We can't just sit here," Jessica interjected, her practical nature asserting itself. "Whether it's a trick of the mind or something truly alien, staying here, letting it gnaw at us, is a recipe for disaster. We'll go mad. We'll turn on each other. Or worse, we'll just succumb." She glanced at Mark, whose eyes were now closed, his lips moving in silent communion with the pervasive hum. "So what's the alternative?" David asked, his voice low, heavy with the weight of the decision. "We go down? We drill. We send someone into that abyss to find out what's making this music. We send a drone first," Emily immediately countered, her scientific caution reasserting itself. "We have the deep-sea ROV, the Nautilus. It's rated for extreme depths, equipped with sonar, high-definition cameras, environmental sensors. We send it down the boreholes we already have, or we drill a new one specifically for this." "The boreholes are too narrow," David said, shaking his head. "And we've already lost 3 sensor arrays to whatever's down there. They just went dead. Not a short, not a malfunction. Just gone. The Nautilus is our last resort, Emily. If we lose that, we're blind." "But if we send a person?" Jessica's voice trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air. The risk was unimaginable. The frigid water, the immense pressure, the unknown entity that was broadcasting its presence. And the psychological effects were already proving devastating. "We have to know," David said, his voice firm, a new resolve hardening his features. "The hum isn't going to stop. It's only going to get louder, more insistent. We can't escape it. Not out here. Not in this station. It's already inside our heads. The only way to make it stop, to save ourselves, is to understand it. To face it." Emily looked from David to Mark, then to Jessica, her eyes finally settling on the screen displaying the chaotic, rhythmic anomaly. Her scientific curiosity, usually her greatest strength, was now a dangerous compulsion, an irresistible urge to unravel this impossible mystery. The hum was no longer just a threat. It was a challenge, a siren song for the intellect. "We'll need to reinforce the existing borehole," she stated, her voice regaining some of its usual analytical clarity, though tinged with a tremor of apprehension. "Expand it, and then carefully lower the Nautilus. We'll need to prepare it for every contingency. Strengthen its hull, add more shielding, enhance its data transmission. We'll need to work fast." Jessica nodded, already moving towards the equipment bay. "I'll start prepping the dive suits just in case. And the decompression chambers. Redundant systems for everything. We'll need to be ready for anything." Mark, still huddled in the corner, suddenly lifted his head, a strange hollow smile on his face. "It's happy," he whispered, his voice eerily calm, cutting through the constant hum. "It knows we're coming." A profound silence, broken only by the relentless drone, fell over the common room. The implication of Mark's words, whether born of madness or an unnerving connection to the unknown, settled like a shroud. They were no longer just scientists on a research mission. They were responding to a summons, stepping into an abyss where the very laws of reality seemed to bend, where something ancient and powerful was waiting. The decision was made. They would descend, and the hum, deep within their bones, within their very minds, seemed to intensify, a triumphant, silent roar of anticipation. A triumphant, silent roar of anticipation. The decision to descend, once merely a terrifying possibility, now solidified into an inescapable command, driven by the relentless, pulsing hum that had burrowed deep into their very consciousness. David, his face a mask of grim determination, began the meticulous preparations, his movements precise and practiced, yet underscored by an almost frantic urgency. Emily, usually the more outwardly composed of the two, found her hands trembling slightly as she double-checked the integrity of their specialized sub-ice suits. These weren't ordinary diving rigs. They were designed for the crushing pressures and abyssal cold of the deep ocean, modified for an even more alien environment, the deep, ancient ice of Antarctica. Their descent capsule, a marvel of engineering named the Nautilus by the crew, stood ready. It was a spherical behemoth of reinforced titanium, bristling with sensors, powerful lights, and redundant life support systems. Its interior was cramped, dominated by control panels and observation ports, each designed for maximum visibility into the frozen abyss. Michael, the lead engineer who had overseen the Nautilus's construction, gave them a final solemn nod from the surface station comm screen. His usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by a look of profound unease. "All systems nominal, David. Pressure integrity at 100%. Comlink stable. Just be careful down there." Careful. The word felt hollow, meaningless, in the face of what they were about to confront. David strapped himself into his seat, the harness biting into his shoulders. Emily followed suit, her gaze already fixed on the main viewport, a circular pane of impossibly thick, transparent material that now showed only the pristine, blinding white of their meticulously drilled ice shaft. The air within the capsule hummed with the quiet thrum of its own machinery, a counterpoint to the deeper, more resonant vibration that still resonated in their bones. "Initiating descent sequence," David announced, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He pressed a series of buttons, and with a barely perceptible lurch, the Nautilus began its slow, deliberate plunge into the dark. The initial meters were unsettlingly mundane. The powerful lights of the capsule cut through the ice, revealing a perfectly smooth, cylindrical tunnel, testament to weeks of painstaking drilling. Ice crystals sparkled like scattered diamonds, reflecting the artificial light back into the capsule. But as they sank deeper, the character of the ice began to change. The pristine clarity gave way to subtle streaks of ancient sediment, trapped millennia ago. Then the first signs of the truly unusual. The hum intensified. It wasn't just a sound now, it was a pressure, a pervasive vibration that resonated through the very structure of the Nautilus, through their seats, through their bodies. It felt less like an external phenomenon and more like an internal resonance, a deep primal chord struck within their own nervous systems. David's teeth began to ache, a dull, persistent throb. Emily pressed a hand to her temple, her eyes squeezed shut for a moment. "Readings?" David asked, forcing the words out. Emily opened her eyes, her brow furrowed. "Gravity fluctuations. Extremely localized, almost like pockets of increased density within the ice itself. And the energy signature is spiking. It's not just sonic. There's a low-frequency electromagnetic component now. Something powerful." The Nautilus continued its descent, each meter feeling like an epoch. The light from their powerful external lamps now struggled to penetrate the increasing murkiness of the ice around them. It wasn't dirty. It was as if the ice itself was absorbing the light, swallowing it whole. The walls of their shaft, once smooth, began to show imperfections, faint, almost imperceptible patterns emerging from the depths. They weren't natural fractures or stress lines. They were too regular, too precise. "David, look," Emily whispered, pointing a gloved finger at the viewport. He squinted, adjusting the external light intensity. There, embedded deep within the ancient ice, perhaps 50 meters from their current position, was a series of faint geometric etchings. They were subtle, almost ghostly, but unmistakable. Perfect hexagons, interlocking circles, lines that defied the chaotic beauty of natural ice formation. They stretched for dozens of meters, a silent, frozen script written by an unknown hand. "They're structures," David breathed, his scientific mind struggling to reconcile the observation with reality. Within the ice, not on the surface of a cavern, but inside the ice matrix itself. "And they radiate," Emily added, her voice barely audible above the rising hum. "The EM field is strongest around them. It's like they're transmitting something or containing it." The hum became a roar in their minds, a pressure that felt like it might crack their skulls. David gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The Nautilus began to vibrate violently, not from mechanical failure, but from the sheer, overwhelming resonance of the external phenomenon. Alarms began to chirp softly on the console, indicating stress on the hull, though the pressure gauges remained stable. It was the internal vibration that was the threat. "This isn't just sound," David said, his voice strained. "This is a force. It's trying to get in." Suddenly, the capsule lurched violently to the side. Red warning lights flashed across the control panel. Emily cried out, flung against her harness. David fought the controls, trying to stabilize their trajectory. "What was that?" Emily demanded, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know. We're not hitting anything. The shaft is clear," David countered, his gaze darting between the viewport and the diagnostics. "It's like a magnetic pull, or a localized gravity well shifted." The Nautilus spun slowly, its powerful lights momentarily sweeping across the ice walls, revealing more of the impossible structures. They weren't just etchings. Some seemed to be three-dimensional, like immense, frozen scaffolding, or the skeletal remains of something vast and intricate. And then the light caught something else, something much larger, much darker, and utterly alien. It was a colossal obsidian-black mass, perfectly smooth and impossibly angular, embedded deep within the ice hundreds of meters below them, but visible now as the capsule had twisted. It was not organic nor geological. It was manufactured, but not by human hands. Its surface seemed to absorb all light, creating a void in the shimmering ice. And from its depths the hum pulsed, a silent, deafening declaration of its presence. "My God," Emily whispered, her breath fogging the viewport. "It's huge, and it's not natural. It's something else." The Nautilus continued its uncontrolled, slow spin, caught in an unseen current, its lights tracing the contours of the immense object. It was shaped like a truncated pyramid, but with impossible angles, its edges razor-sharp, its faces utterly devoid of any markings save for the absolute blackness. It stretched for what looked like kilometers, disappearing into the unfathomable depths of the ice below. This was not the source, David realized with a chilling certainty. This was merely the beginning. And then, as the capsule completed its slow rotation, their lights fell upon a specific point on the obsidian structure, a point that seemed to glow with a faint internal light, a pulsating deep violet. And from that point something shifted. A section of the black surface began to ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen force, and then slowly and possibly it began to open. A perfectly geometric fissure appeared, widening with agonizing slowness, revealing not a void behind it, but an intense, blinding light, and a sound that was no longer a hum, but a resonant, guttural thrum that shook the very fabric of their reality. The Nautilus's systems went wild. Alarms shrieked. Lights flickered. The hum became a physical blow, slamming into their chests, stealing their breath. David fought to regain control, but the capsule was no longer responding. It was being drawn inexorably towards the opening in the black structure, towards the blinding light and the terrifying, deafening thrum, a sound that promised both revelation and absolute annihilation. Emily screamed, a sound lost in the cacophony, as the Nautilus plunged forward, pulled into the maw of the impossible structure, into the heart of the sound that came from below the ice. The Nautilus didn't crash. That was the first bewildering realization to penetrate Eris Thorne's dazed consciousness. Instead of the bone-jarring impact he'd braced for, a strange, almost gentle deceleration had gripped the submersible. It felt less like a collision and more like being caught, cradled by an immense unseen force. The cacophony of the external sound, which had threatened to tear their very atoms apart, had been abruptly muted, replaced by a profound, resonant hum that vibrated through the hull, through the seats, through their very bones. Emily, still strapped into her co-pilot's chair, was gasping, her eyes wide with the terror that hadn't yet fully receded. Michael was struggling with the console, his hands flying across controls that now seemed unresponsive, his face etched with a mix of panic and utter bewilderment. David, in the rear, was shouting something about power fluctuations, his voice thick with static from the intercom. "Report," Eris barked, his own voice hoarse, the scientific imperative overriding the primal fear still thrumming in his veins. He blinked, trying to clear the haze from his vision. The internal lights of the Nautilus flickered erratically, casting long dancing shadows across the cramped cabin. "All systems nominal, Doctor, but we're not moving under our own power," Michael stammered, his fingers still dancing over the unresponsive joysticks. "Thrusters are offline. Navigation is gone. We're just drifting." "Drifting where?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible above the pervasive hum. She pointed a trembling finger at the main viewport. Eris followed her gaze, and his breath hitched. The viewport, moments ago filled with the swirling chaos of the abyss, now revealed something utterly impossible. They were inside. Not a cavern, not a natural formation, but a vast geometric chamber stretching out into an infinite darkness. The walls were not rock or ice, but a material that seemed to absorb light, a matte, obsidian-like surface that shimmered with an internal faint phosphorescence. It defied every known principle of architecture and physics. There were no visible seams, no rivets, no indication of construction. Simply was. The chamber was colossal, far larger than any underground space they could have conceived. The Nautilus, a formidable vessel, looked like a forgotten toy boat adrift in an ocean-sized hall. Above them, or perhaps below, Eris couldn't tell, intricate patterns of light pulsed gently, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. These weren't random flashes. They were structured, complex arrays that seemed to shift and reform with an alien logic. And the hum? Inside, it was clearer, more distinct. It wasn't just a low thrum. It was a symphony of frequencies, a complex, layered sound that resonated with a strange, almost melodic quality. It felt ancient, profound, and utterly alien. "My God!" Emily breathed, her earlier scream replaced by a sound of sheer, unadulterated awe. "What is this place?" Eris found his voice, a scientist's voice, though it trembled with the enormity of what they faced. It's artificial, unquestionably artificial, and impossibly vast." He reached for his comms, attempting to raise the surface, knowing it was futile. Static, thick and unyielding was the only reply. They were beyond reach. They were alone. Michael, having given up on the controls, was now staring out the viewport, his mouth agape. How can it be this big? We're thousands of feet below the ice sheet. There's no way a structure of this scale could exist without being detected. Unless it wasn't meant to be detected, Eris countered, his mind racing, trying to categorize and analyze something that defied all categories. Unless it's been here for millennia, hidden, or dormant. He felt a strange pull, a subtle shift in the Nautilus, as if it were being guided, not by thrusters, but by some invisible current within the chamber. "Doctor, gravity's fluctuating." David's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone more frantic now. "Readings are all over the place. We're experiencing microgravity one moment, then a sudden increase. It's not stable." Eris felt it too, a disconcerting lightness, then a sudden heavy pressure. It was like their internal compass was spinning, their sense of up and down, left and right being constantly redefined. The Nautilus continued its slow, deliberate drift, carried deeper into the structure's heart. As they moved, the intricate light patterns on the obsidian walls grew more pronounced. They weren't just patterns, they were glyphs, symbols unlike anything Eris had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with an inner light, shifting in color from deep violet to emerald green, then to a fiery orange. They told a story, Eris was certain. A story etched in light and energy, but one he had no frame of reference to understand. "Can we get any readings on the material composition?" Eris asked, tearing his gaze from the mesmerizing display, forcing himself back to scientific protocol. Emily, despite her fear, was already working, her fingers flying over her own console, calling up sensor data. Attempting. Scanners are having trouble penetrating. It's dense. Incredibly dense. And it's emitting a strange energy signature. Not electromagnetic, not thermal. Something else. Something utterly unique. She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. Wait, there's a faint, underlying resonance. A harmonic frequency that matches. That matches the sound we heard outside. So the structure itself is generating the sound, Eris mused aloud, a chill running down his spine. Or it's a conduit, a massive instrument. Suddenly, the Nautilus tilted sharply downwards, plunging into an even deeper abyss within the chamber. The hum intensified, becoming a physical presence, vibrating in their teeth, their bones, their very cells. The light patterns around them accelerated, flashing with a dizzying speed, transforming into intricate, swirling vortexes of color. It was as if the structure was reacting to their presence, or perhaps bringing them to a specific destination. "Hold on," Michael yelled, bracing himself against the console as the sub picked up speed. The feeling of being guided was now undeniable, a relentless force pulling them into the unknown. Emily cried out, pointing frantically at the main viewport. "Look!" The descent culminated not in a crash, but a smooth, graceful entry into another smaller chamber. This one was different. It wasn't vast and open, but enclosed, cylindrical, and bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light that emanated from the walls themselves. In the center of this chamber, suspended in the inexplicable microgravity, was an object. It was roughly spherical, about 20 feet in diameter, and glowed with the same soft blue light as the chamber walls, but with an added internal luminescence that seemed to shift and breathe. Its surface was perfectly smooth, utterly seamless, yet Eris could discern faint, intricate lines etched into its surface, patterns that mirrored the glyphs they had seen on the larger chamber walls. It was impossibly elegant, impossibly complex, and radiating an energy that made the hairs on Eris's arms stand on end. The Nautilus came to a gentle stop, hovering just feet away from this mesmerizing sphere. The pervasive hum in the sub lessened, though it didn't disappear entirely. It was as if they had arrived at the source, or at least a major node. Emily's voice was a barely audible whisper. What is it?" Eris, his eyes glued to the object, felt a profound sense of recognition, not of something he'd ever seen, but of something he had always known was possible, yet utterly beyond human comprehension. "It's a power source," he stated, his voice filled with a reverence he rarely allowed himself. "Or a data core. Or both. It's the heart of this place." As he spoke, one of the faint lines on the sphere's surface began to glow more brightly, a shimmering sapphire light tracing a path across its smooth expanse. Then another and another, until a complex network of luminous pathways crisscrossed the entire sphere. The blue light in the chamber pulsed in sync with these new patterns, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm. "Doctor," Michael interjected, his voice strained, "the Nautilus's power systems are fluctuating wildly. Our internal power is dropping, but our sensors are showing an increase in ambient energy. It's like something is drawing power from us, or feeding energy into the sub in a way we can't comprehend." Eris felt a sudden, inexplicable coldness, despite the ambient warmth of the sub. It wasn't just energy, it was information. The sphere, the structure, it was alive in some unfathomable way. It was observing them, learning. Then the hum in the chamber intensified once more, not violently, but with a deliberate, focused intent. The sapphire lines on the sphere began to flash rapidly, and the blue light bathing the chamber started to flicker, creating an unsettling strobe effect. A new sound emerged, superimposed over the deep hum, a higher frequency, a series of clicks and whistles, incredibly fast, incredibly complex, like an alien language being spoken directly into their minds. It was too fast to parse, too intricate to understand, but it was undeniably a communication. Emily clutched her head, wincing. It's overwhelming. I can almost understand it, but it's too fast, too much." Eris felt the same dizzying assault on his senses, a torrent of information threatening to overload his brain. He tried to focus, to find a pattern, a rhythm, anything that would make sense. This wasn't just a sound, it was a deluge of data, raw and unfiltered. Suddenly, the blue light in the chamber intensified to an unbearable brilliance, washing out all other colors. The clicks and whistles reached a fever pitch, and the Nautilus began to vibrate violently, not from external forces, but from within, as if its very molecular structure was being resonated by the alien frequencies. Alarms blared, a cacophony of red lights flashing across the control panels. "We're losing power," Michael yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. "Main systems failing. Life support. Oh God, life support is compromised." The air in the cabin grew thick, heavy and metallic tasting. Eris felt a crushing pressure building in his chest, his ears ringing, his vision blurring. The sphere in the center of the room pulsed with an ominous, blinding light, and the rapid alien language filled every corner of the sub, every crevice of their minds. It was no longer a communication. It felt like an interrogation, a forceful penetration of their very being. Emily screamed again, a raw, terrified sound, as a jolt of pure energy coursed through the Nautilus, throwing her against her restraints. The blue light flared one last, blinding time, and then as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. The chamber plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by the dying emergency lights of the Nautilus. The alien language ceased, replaced by a profound, ominous silence, broken only by the labored breathing of the crew and the groaning of the sub's failing systems. The sphere in the center of the chamber was now completely dark, inert, an unblinking eye staring back at them from the abyss. They were alive. Barely. But something had fundamentally changed. The air was still thick, the pressure in Eris's head persistent. He looked at Emily, her face pale, her eyes wide with a horror that transcended mere fear. Michael was slumped over his console, unconscious. David was screaming something incoherent from the rear compartment. Eris felt a prickling sensation on his skin, a deep, unsettling awareness that they had been scanned, analyzed, their minds laid bare. The silence was not empty. It was pregnant with a knowing presence. The sound from below the ice had not just led them here. It had consumed them, and now it was waiting. For what Eris couldn't even begin to imagine. But he knew with chilling certainty that their journey had just begun, and the true nature of their discovery was far more terrifying than any frozen tomb. A cold dread, far deeper than the Antarctic chill, settled in Eris's bones. The cavern, once a wonder, now felt like the maw of some ancient, hungry beast. Liam stood rigid beside him, his breath fogging in the frigid air, eyes wide and unseeing, fixed on the shimmering, impossible structure buried deep within the ice. Dr. Anya Sharma, usually the picture of composed scientific detachment, had taken a step back, her hand pressed against her mouth, a silent scream trapped behind her fingers. The air thrummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration, a phantom echo of the sound that had just ripped through their minds. It wasn't just a sound, it was an intrusion, a deliberate probe into their very consciousness. Eris forced himself to move, his muscles stiff with terror. He reached out, his hand brushing Liam's shoulder. Liam flinched violently, snapping out of his trance, his gaze darting around the cavern as if expecting an attack from the shadows. Did you feel that?" Liam's voice was a ragged whisper, barely audible over the hum of their equipment. "It wasn't just a sound, Eris. It was a thought, a presence." Anya finally lowered her hand, her face pale. "It was a directed energy pulse," she stated, her voice trembling but trying to cling to scientific explanation. "A resonance frequency designed to bypass auditory processing and stimulate specific neural pathways. It was communicating." "Communicating what?" Eris demanded, his own voice sounding alien in his ears. He looked from Anya to Liam, then back to the colossal alien edifice. It was impossible to reconcile Anya's clinical analysis with the raw primal fear that still pulsed through him. The structure didn't look like something that communicated. It looked like something that waited. "I don't know," Anya admitted, her scientific facade cracking. "But it was hostile, or at least profoundly indifferent to our well-being. It was a probe, a test. It wanted to see if we were receptive." A chilling thought occurred to Eris. Receptive to what? Its presence? Its existence? Suddenly, the low hum in the air intensified. It wasn't the deafening roar from before, but a deep, resonant throb that seemed to originate from the very core of the ice. The cavern walls began to vibrate gently, and tiny ice crystals, dislodged by the tremor, showered down from the ceiling like glittering dust. The lights on their helmets flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that made the alien structure seem to writhe and shift. Liam stumbled, grabbing for the rock wall to steady himself. "My sensors are going crazy," he yelled over the rising thrum. "Electromagnetic fluctuations off the charts. And I'm picking up something else. A pattern. It's not random, Anya, it's ordered." Anya pulled a small, handheld device from her pack, its screen flickering with lines of rapidly changing data. Her brow furrowed in concentration, her fear momentarily overshadowed by scientific curiosity. "The resonance is increasing," she murmured, more to herself than to them. "And Liam's right. There's a substructure to it. A complex waveform. It's almost like a language." "A language?" Eris felt a fresh wave of dread wash over him. "You mean it's talking to us?" "Or talking through us," Anya corrected, her eyes wide with a terrifying realization. That initial pulse, it wasn't just a greeting. It was an imprint. It left something behind in our minds. A receiver. The idea that something had been implanted in his consciousness, without his knowledge or consent, was sickening. Eris felt an urge to claw at his own head, to rip out whatever foreign presence might be lurking there. He looked at Liam, who was now clutching his temples, his face contorted in pain. "Liam, are you all right?" Eris asked, stepping towards him. Liam shook his head, groaning. "My ears, they're ringing. And I keep seeing flashes, like symbols. In my head." Anya rushed to Liam's side, shining her helmet light on his face. "What kind of symbols, Liam? Can you describe them?" Liam squeezed his eyes shut. "They're angular, like nothing I've ever seen. And they're moving, shifting. It's like a puzzle, but my brain can't quite grasp it. It feels invasive." The hum grew louder, a deep guttural growl that resonated in Eris's chest. The air grew heavier, colder, and a faint acrid smell, like ozone mixed with something ancient and metallic, began to permeate their suits. Eris looked back at the colossal structure. The shimmering light on its surface seemed to intensify, pulsing in rhythm with the rising thrum. He noticed something new, something terrifying. Along the edges of the structure, where it met the surrounding ice, faint cracks were beginning to spiderweb outwards. "Anya, look!" Eris pointed, his voice strained. It's expanding. Or the ice is reacting to it." Anya followed his gaze, her breath catching in her throat. "The thermal signature is spiking," she reported, her voice hushed with awe and terror. "The energy output is increasing exponentially. It's not just resonating with the ice, Eris. It's influencing it, melting it from within." As if on cue, a deep groaning sound echoed through the cavern, distinct from the hum. It was the sound of immense pressure, of ancient ice submitting to an unseen force. A chunk of ice, roughly the size of a car, broke away from the cavern ceiling with a deafening crack and crashed into the crystalline floor, shattering into countless pieces. The impact sent a fresh wave of tremors through the ground, and Eris almost lost his footing. "We need to get out of here," Liam shouted, his voice laced with panic. "This place is becoming unstable." But Anya, her eyes glued to her device, seemed oblivious to the immediate danger. "The symbols Liam is seeing, I'm getting a correlation. The waveform from the structure, when filtered, resolves into a visual representation. It's a blueprint, or a map." Eris felt a surge of conflicting emotions, the overwhelming instinct to flee, battling with a burgeoning morbid fascination. A blueprint? A map? What could this ancient alien entity possibly be mapping? Or building? A map of what, Anya? Eris pressed, forcing himself to remain calm despite the growing chaos around them. The ground beneath their feet was now vibrating continuously, a low, unsettling rumble that threatened to dislodge more ice. Anya held up her device, its screen displaying a complex, geometric pattern that shifted and pulsed. "It's not a map of a place on Earth," she said, her voice filled with a strange, almost reverent awe. "It's a star chart, and it's not just static. It's showing trajectories, paths, star charts, trajectories." The words hung heavy in the air, a cosmic weight suddenly pressing down on them. This wasn't just an ancient artifact, it was an interstellar beacon, or a prison, or a gateway. The hum from the structure intensified once more, reaching a crescendo that made their teeth ache. This time it wasn't just a physical vibration. It felt like a direct assault on their minds. Eris felt a searing pain behind his eyes, a phantom pressure building in his skull. He saw flashes too, just like Liam had described, angular, alien symbols swirling in his peripheral vision, just beyond his conscious grasp. They felt like fragments of a colossal, incomprehensible message, trying to force their way into his understanding. Then the ground beneath them lurched violently. A massive crack, accompanied by a sound like thunder, ripped through the crystalline floor, extending directly towards the alien structure. The air filled with a fine mist of ice particles, illuminated by their flickering lights, making it seem as if the cavern itself was dissolving around them. "We're trapped," Liam screamed, pointing to a fresh collapse of ice and rock that had sealed off their entry point. The path they had painstakingly carved through the glacial tunnel was gone, buried under tons of unstable ice. Eris stumbled, his head throbbing. The symbols were more persistent now, forming fleeting patterns, almost words, in his mind. He felt a profound sense of presence emanating from the structure, no longer passive, no longer merely waiting. It was aware of them, interacting with them, and now it seemed it was pulling them deeper into its incomprehensible purpose. The star charts, the trajectories, the language of light and sound, it was all part of an awakening. Anya, still clutching her device, looked up, her gaze fixed on the colossal alien enigma. Her lips moved, forming words Eris couldn't quite hear over the growing roar of the ice and the internal clamor in his mind. But he saw the look in her eyes, a terrifying blend of fear, wonder, and a nascent understanding that threatened to shatter her sanity. The structure pulsed again, a brilliant, blinding flash of light that momentarily overwhelmed their helmet lamps. When Eris's vision cleared, he saw something new, something impossible. The ice around the base of the structure was no longer merely cracking. It was receding, melting at an accelerated, unnatural rate, revealing more of the alien edifice. And from the newly exposed surface, faint, glowing lines began to emerge, forming intricate patterns, pulsating with an internal light. It was not just a dormant relic. It was a machine, and it was activating. The hum shifted, becoming a low, rhythmic throb, like a colossal heart beating beneath the ice. The air grew heavy with an oppressive energy, and Eris felt a strange, compelling pull towards the glowing patterns. It was as if the structure was calling to him, speaking directly to the newly implanted receiver in his mind, drawing him closer, inviting him to witness its rebirth. He fought against the urge, but his feet felt heavy, almost independent of his will. Liam was on his knees, clutching his head, groaning in agony. Anya stood frozen, her face illuminated by the eerie glow, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fascination. The cavern was no longer just a frozen tomb. It was a chamber of awakening, a place where the ancient past was violently colliding with a terrifying future. They weren't just observers anymore. They were part of it. The sound from below the ice had found them, and now it was no longer just a sound. It was a command. The command wasn't a voice, not in any way they understood sound. It was an involuntary surge, a profound, undeniable imperative that bypassed their ears entirely and settled deep within the marrow of their bones. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an absolute, an undeniable knowing that eclipsed all rational thought. For Michael, it was a sudden icy dread coupled with an overwhelming, almost magnetic pull. His mind screamed for logic, for an explanation, but his body was already responding, a primal instinct overriding every learned caution. Jessica felt it as a violent disruption in her own equilibrium, a cacophony of sensations that her scientific training had no framework for. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not just from fear, but from a terrifying sense of recognition. It was as if a dormant part of her brain had been violently awakened, understanding a language it had never been taught. Her hands trembled, her instruments suddenly feeling like useless toys in the face of this colossal unseen force. David, ever the pragmatist, was hit by a wave of pure, unadulterated instinct. Every fiber of his being screamed to move, to follow an unseen path, to reach something vital. It was a hunter's instinct, sharpened to an unbearable edge, but without a clear target. He clenched his jaw, fighting against the feeling, yet his feet were already shifting, his eyes scanning the endless white as if searching for an invisible beacon. And Emily, the youngest, the most attuned to the subtle shifts in the world around them, felt it as a crushing weight, an ancient song resonating within her very soul. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a melody of creation and destruction, A call from something impossibly old and impossibly powerful. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the sensation. She felt a profound connection, a terrifying intimacy with the source of the sound, as if it had reached out and taken hold of her very essence. They stood there, paralyzed for a moment, each wrestling with this internal invasion, this psychic usurpation of their free will. No one spoke, yet they all understood. The sound had evolved. It was no longer a distant hum, no longer a mysterious vibration. It was a directed force, a singular, undeniable command that resonated differently within each of them, yet pointed them all towards the same terrifying destination. The air around them grew impossibly colder, a biting chill that seemed to seep directly into their lungs, bypassing their thick gear. A faint ethereal shimmer began to ripple across the vast expanse of ice, like heat haze over a desert, but composed of pure, frigid light. Michael's breath hitched. The compass on his wrist, usually a steadfast guide, began to spin wildly, its needle gyrating in a frantic, meaningless dance. Jessica's portable environmental scanner shrieked, its display flickering erratically before dying completely. The readings had gone beyond its capacity, beyond anything it was designed to measure. Did you feel that? Michael finally managed, his voice a strained whisper, barely audible over the sudden, low groan that emanated from the ice beneath their feet. Emily, still trembling, could only nod, her eyes wide and fixed on a specific point in the distance, a place where the shimmering light seemed to coalesce, twisting into a faint, almost imperceptible vortex. David, his face grim, pointed a gloved finger. Something's happening to the ice. Look. Where the shimmering light was most intense, the ice had begun to shift. Cracks, thin as spiderwebs at first, then widening into deep fissures, snaked across the surface. But these weren't random fractures. They seemed to follow a deliberate geometric pattern, as if an invisible hand was etching a design into the frozen landscape. The groaning intensified, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through their boots, up their legs and into their chests. Then slowly, majestically, a massive section of the ice began to descend. It wasn't breaking apart. It was sinking smoothly, silently, as if operated by some immense unseen machinery. As the ice receded, a chasm began to open, revealing not dark water, but something else entirely. Beneath the newly exposed surface, carved directly into the ancient ice, was an opening. It was utterly artificial, a perfect archway, impossibly precise, framed by walls that seemed to be made of solidified light rather than ice. The light within this newly revealed passage pulsed faintly, a soft, internal glow that seemed to beckon them. It was a doorway, ancient and alien, untouched by millennia of ice and time, now unveiled. The command intensified, a relentless, irresistible pull towards this newly revealed threshold. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a physical force, urging their every muscle forward. Michael felt his legs begin to move, almost against his conscious will. His mind screamed for caution, for analysis, for retreat, but his body obeyed the deeper, more primal directive. As they drew closer to the archway, the air around it grew heavy, thick with a strange, metallic tang and a subtle hum that vibrated deep in their bones, echoing the original mysterious sound, but now amplified, focused. Faint, intricate symbols began to glow into existence on the ice walls bordering the entrance. They weren't static, they pulsed with a dim, internal light, shifting and reconfiguring themselves, like an unknown language being written and rewritten before their very eyes. Each symbol seemed to resonate with the hum, creating a complex, hypnotic rhythm. "What is this place?" Jessica whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and awe, her scientific curiosity warring with a profound sense of dread. She reached out a hand almost instinctively to touch the shimmering symbols, but Michael grabbed her arm. "Don't," he warned, his voice hoarse. "We don't know what this is." But the command was too strong, too pervasive. It wasn't just a suggestion to enter. It was an absolute imperative. A profound sense of ancient power emanated from the doorway, mixed with a chilling premonition of what lay beyond. They hesitated, fear warring with the irresistible pull, their minds screaming for escape, but their bodies moving forward, one step after another, drawn by an unseen, undeniable force. Emily, her eyes still wide, her face pale but strangely serene, was the first to cross the threshold. She walked with an unnatural grace, almost in a trance, as if guided by an invisible hand. The moment her boot touched the ground inside the archway, the glowing symbols flared brighter, and the hum intensified, resonating directly through the ground. Michael, Jessica, and David followed, compelled by the same unseen force. The moment their bodies crossed the invisible boundary of the archway, a sudden blinding flash of pure white light erupted from within the passage, engulfing them entirely. It was accompanied by a deafening, resonating thrum, a sound so deep and powerful it vibrated through the very ground, shaking the ice field around them with violent tremors. The ancient ice groaned and cracked with a sound like thunder, not just beneath them, but stretching far into the distance. They weren't merely entering a place, they were activating something. They were stepping into the heart of a mystery that had slept for eons, and in doing so, they had violently awakened it. The awakening was not a gentle stretch after a long slumber. It was a violent, convulsive shudder that ripped through the very fabric of the colossal structure. The low hum, which had been a constant, unnerving companion, suddenly deepened, transforming into a resonant thrum that vibrated not just in their ears, but in their bones, in the very marrow of their being. It was a sound that didn't just fill the air. It displaced it, pushing against them with an almost physical force. Michael stumbled, his hand instinctively reaching for the icy wall, finding no purchase as the entire passage pitched beneath his feet. The emergency lights, which had provided a fragile sense of security, flickered wildly, strobing the ancient metallic ice walls in disorienting flashes of white and shadow. For a terrifying moment, they plunged into absolute darkness, the thrumming sound swelling to an unbearable crescendo, a roaring wave of pure sonic energy that seemed to claw at their sanity. "Hold on!" Michael yelled, his voice swallowed by the cacophony, barely audible even to himself. He could feel the panic rising cold and sharp in his throat. This wasn't just a geological shift, nor an electrical short. This was an orchestrated, deliberate surge of power, a titanic mechanism grinding into motion after an eternity of stillness. Jessica, ever the scientist, fought against the primal fear, her eyes scanning the flickering readouts on her wrist-mounted device. The energy signatures were off the charts, spiking erratically, then settling into a pattern she couldn't comprehend. It's drawing power from somewhere," she gasped, her voice strained. "Massive energy fluctuations, and the atmospheric pressure is changing." David's comms crackled, then died, plunging them into an even deeper isolation. "No signal. All systems down, Michael. The external link is severed." His voice was laced with a raw fear that chilled them more than the frigid air. "The internal network is failing too. We're blind." Emily, usually the most composed, pressed herself against a wall that had begun to radiate a peculiar, almost electrical warmth, an unnerving contrast to the biting cold of the air. "What is this place? It feels like it's breathing." The thrumming shifted again, losing its chaotic edge, evolving into something more rhythmic, more complex. It was still bone-shakingly loud, but now there was a distinct pulse to it, like a gargantuan heart beating deep within the ice. And within that pulse, new layers began to emerge, high-pitched, almost crystalline chimes, interwoven with deep, guttural groans that resonated from unfathomable depths. It was a symphony of alien awakening, terrifying in its majesty. As the lights struggled back to a steady, albeit dimmer glow, they saw the changes. The metallic sheen on the walls now seemed to ripple, almost fluid, as if the very material was alive, responding to the internal vibrations. Fine lines of iridescent light, like veins of pure energy, began to trace intricate patterns across the surfaces, illuminating glyphs and symbols they hadn't noticed before. These weren't carvings, they appeared to be an intrinsic part of the structure itself, now pulsing with a faint internal luminescence. "Look!" Jessica pointed, her gloved finger trembling slightly. "The temperature. It's plummeting in some sections, rising sharply in others. It's not uniform. It's like there are thermal currents deliberately controlled." A low, grating sound echoed from ahead, followed by a rush of air that smelled faintly of ozone and something metallic, yet organic. It was a smell that evoked forgotten machinery and primordial depths. A section of the passage ahead, previously a solid wall of ice metal, began to retract, sliding away with a groan of ancient mechanisms, revealing a new, darker opening. "It's opening a new path," Michael whispered, his hand going to the sidearm at his hip, a futile gesture against something so immense and unknown. "It's showing us the way." A silent, communal dread settled over them. Was it a path or a trap? Were they being guided or lured? The rhythmic pulse of the structure intensified, urging them forward, pulling them with an invisible current. The new passage was narrower, steeper, descending into an abyss where the light struggled to penetrate. The air grew heavier, denser, and the strange metallic organic scent became more potent, almost overpowering. "We have to go," Emily stated, her voice quiet but firm. "It's clearly not letting us turn back. We're in its belly now." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. Retreat was no longer an option. They moved forward, their footsteps echoing faintly against the overwhelming thrum. The walls of the new tunnel were different, less metallic, more like polished dark obsidian, reflecting their headlamp beams into infinite, distorted points of light. The glowing lines, however, continued here, weaving complex tapestries of light that seemed to shift and change, hinting at an unknown language or a vast, intricate circuit board. As they descended deeper, the sound evolved once more. It was no longer just a pulse and chimes. Now a low, resonant frequency began to emerge, a sound so deep it bypassed their ears entirely and resonated directly in their skulls, creating a profound sense of disorientation and unease. It felt like a whisper from the void, a silent scream from the heart of cosmic darkness. David clutched his head, groaning. I can't think straight. It's inside my head." Jessica's face was pale. "It's infrasound. Extremely low frequency. It can induce fear, anxiety, even hallucinations. It's designed to disorient." But was it a design or a natural byproduct of whatever massive force was now active? They reached a point where the passage opened into a vast chamber. Their headlamps, even on full power, were swallowed by the immensity of the space. It was so large that the ceiling and far walls were lost in shadow, giving the unnerving impression of being suspended in a void. The floor was not flat, but a series of gently curving, polished platforms, descending in concentric rings towards a central glowing abyss. And from that abyss, the sound intensified, becoming the dominant force in their reality. It was here that the true nature of the sound began to reveal itself. It wasn't just a physical vibration, nor a disorienting frequency. It was layered, complex, and strangely intelligent. It had rhythm, it had cadence, it had variations that seemed to respond to their presence, ebbing and flowing as they moved. It was a symphony of an alien mind, a language spoken in pure energy and vibration. The glowing lines from the passages converged here, forming a mesmerizing, intricate web across the platforms, all flowing downwards towards the central abyss. And from that abyss, a light pulsed, not a steady glow, but a rhythmic, organic throbbing, like a colossal heart beating in the darkness. As they approached the edge of the first platform, peering into the radiant chasm, the infrasound intensified, making their vision swim. Michael felt a wave of nausea, his stomach churning. Emily gasped, clutching her chest. David swayed, almost losing his footing. Jessica, despite her own discomfort, was mesmerized. It's a generator," she whispered, awe and terror battling in her voice. "Or a core. But it's not mechanical. It's biological. Look at the patterns of light, the way it pulses. It's like a living organism, generating unimaginable power." The light from the abyss was not white nor blue, but a swirling vortex of deep violet and shimmering emerald, casting unearthly hues across the vast chamber. And within that light, they began to discern shapes. Not solid objects, but shifting, ethereal forms, like shadows dancing in liquid light. They were indistinct, fleeting, yet profoundly unsettling. They were too large to be human, too fluid to be static. Then the sound changed one final time. The deep infrasound receded slightly, replaced by a series of distinct, almost melodic tones that rose and fell within the overarching thrum. It was a sequence, a pattern repeating itself, then varying, then repeating again. It was a call, an invitation, or perhaps a command. And as the melodic sequence reached its crescendo, one of the shimmering ethereal forms within the violet emerald light solidified, just for a moment. It was massive, indistinct, yet undeniably present. It had no discernible features, no clear limbs or head, but it radiated an ancient, immense presence that made the air crackle with latent power. And then a sound that cut through all the other layers of the symphony. A single clear, piercing tone, like a bell struck from a metal not of this earth. It emanated directly from the solidified form, echoing through the vast chamber, reverberating in their very souls. It was a sound that didn't just speak, it communicated. It conveyed a feeling of profound age, of immense power, and of an undeniable terrifying awareness. It was the sound that had waited for them, the sound that had called them, the sound that came from below the ice, now fully awakened, fully present, and directly, terrifyingly addressing them. And in its unearthly tone they understood, with a chilling certainty that turned their blood to ice, that they were no longer observers. They were participants. They were prey. The silence that followed this realization was not empty, but heavy with an unspoken horror that pressed down on them, stealing the air from their lungs. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the absence of everything else that was terrifying. The hum of the station, the creak of the ice, the distant moan of the wind, all seemed to vanish, leaving only the resonant echo of that final, chilling understanding. David was the first to move, or rather, to flinch. His hand flew to his comm's earpiece, an instinctive, desperate gesture to call for help that he immediately knew was futile. There was no help. They were thousands of miles from any civilization, marooned on a frozen expanse that now felt less like a scientific outpost and more like a cage. His eyes, wide with a terror that mirrored Sarah's, darted from the monitors, where the alien sigil still pulsed with an ominous light, to Michael, whose face was a mask of stunned disbelief, and then to Emily, who had gone utterly pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the console. It knows we're here," Emily whispered, her voice barely a breath. "It's talking to us. It's angry." Sarah, ever the one to seek understanding even in the face of the incomprehensible, shook her head slowly. "More than angry, Emily. It's claiming us. It's not just communication anymore. It's a declaration." She stumbled over the words, her academic mind struggling to categorize something so primally terrifying. The frequency shift. The harmonic overlay. It's no longer a call from below. It's a presence within. As she spoke, a new sensation began to permeate the station. It wasn't a sound that hit their ears, but a vibration that resonated deep in their bones. A low guttural thrum that felt like the entire world was holding its breath, or perhaps, preparing to exhale with catastrophic force. The lights in the lab flickered, not in a random short circuit, but in a rhythmic pulse that mirrored the unseen tremor. Loose equipment rattled on shelves, and a fine dust, dislodged from the ceiling, drifted down in the eerie, pulsating light. Michael, shaking off his initial paralysis, sprang into action. What in God's name is that? Seismic activity? A pressure wave? He rushed to his seismic monitors, his fingers flying across the holographic displays. The readouts were chaotic, a blizzard of data points that made no sense. "No, this isn't seismic. It's focused, concentrated. It's coming directly from it." He pointed a trembling finger at the deepest part of the sonar display, where the colossal structure now seemed to glow with an internal malevolent energy. The vibration intensified. It felt like their very atoms were being rearranged. A profound disquiet that settled in their stomachs and made their teeth ache. Then the sound returned. But it was no longer the complex, almost melodic sequence they had been studying. This was raw, primitive, a single monstrous chord that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality, a deafening, sustained roar that was both internal and external, shattering their composure. They clapped their hands over their ears, but it was useless. The sound bypassed their auditory canals, vibrating directly within their skulls, a pure, unfiltered terror that threatened to rupture their sanity. Images flashed behind their eyes. Not their own memories, but disjointed, primordial visions of crushing depths, endless darkness, and an ancient, consuming hunger. It was a glimpse into the entity's mind, a terrifying, fleeting communion that left them gasping for air, their bodies spasming involuntarily. David, fighting through the overwhelming assault, stumbled towards the main control panel. "We have to shut it down. Cut the power to the probes. Disconnect everything." "Too late," Emily shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at her own console. "The probes, they're not just receiving anymore. They're transmitting. It's using our own equipment against us. It's amplifying itself through our systems." A searing pain erupted in David's temples, a white-hot spike that made him cry out and fall to his knees. Sarah collapsed beside him, clutching her head, whimpering. Michael, though still standing, was swaying precariously, his eyes squeezed shut, a low groan escaping his lips. The station's emergency lights, a stark red, flickered on, bathing the lab in an apocalyptic glow, but even they seemed to dim and brighten in time with the entity's monstrous pulse. It's trying to break through," Michael choked out, his voice strained with effort. "The ice. I'm getting massive structural integrity warnings. The pressure is increasing exponentially." He pointed to a display showing the ice sheet directly above the structure. Cracks, previously microscopic, were now spiderwebbing across the holographic representation, expanding at an alarming rate. The deep blue of the ice was streaked with angry red warnings, indicating imminent catastrophic failure. David, forcing himself to breathe through the agony, crawled towards Michael. "What can we do? Can we reverse the polarity? Override the signal?" Michael shook his head, his face contorted in pain. "It's not just a signal, David. It's a force. It's like trying to stop a tidal wave with a straw. It's using our probes as a conduit, but the power is all its own. It's ripping the ice apart from the inside, using our hole as its exit point." The implications hit them with the force of a physical blow. Their scientific curiosity, their quest for knowledge, had not only awakened a dormant horror, but had actively provided it with the means to escape its millennia-long prison. They hadn't just opened a door, they had held it wide open and invited it out. Sarah, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling, suddenly cried out. The language, the patterns. It wasn't just a call. It was a warning, a plea. It was trapped and we didn't listen. We just pushed harder. Her words, though fragmented, resonated with a terrible truth. They had interpreted the complex sequences as a challenge, an enigma to be solved. They had never considered it might be a desperate cry, a barrier, a containment measure. The patterns, the harmonics, the shifting frequencies, they were not just data. They were the intricate locks on a cosmic cage, and the team in their hubris had picked every single one. The station groaned around them, a sound of tortured metal and stressed ice. A crack, loud as a rifle shot, echoed from somewhere above, followed by a shower of ice dust from the ceiling. The temperature in the lab plummeted, the warmth of their breath condensing instantly in the frigid air. Emily, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization, pointed at the main comm screen. The satellite link. It's being hijacked. I'm seeing massive data spikes outbound. It's not just trying to escape the ice, it's trying to reach out. On the screen, a flurry of incomprehensible data streamed outward, not just to their home base but across multiple unknown frequencies. It was a beacon, a signal of its release broadcasting into the vast emptiness of space, and perhaps beyond. David watched in numb despair as the entity, through their own technology, prepared to unleash itself upon a world utterly unprepared for its existence. The terror of being prey was one thing, but the dawning horror that they had become unwitting accomplices in an existential threat to humanity itself was something far more profound, far more crushing. "We have to stop it," David said, his voice hoarse, a desperate whisper against the roaring internal sound. "We have to, whatever it takes." He looked at Michael, then Sarah, then Emily, his eyes pleading for a solution, for any shred of hope. Michael, still grappling with the seismic data, shook his head. "David, it's too powerful. The energy readings, they're off the charts. It's not just cracking the ice, it's shaping it. It's creating a pathway." As if to punctuate his words, a new massive tremor rocked Outpost 73. This wasn't a vibration, but a violent lurch that threw them off their feet. Alarms blared, a cacophony of shrill warnings that added to the sensory overload. The main screen showing the ice sheet went from red warnings to a catastrophic black. "Breach!" Emily screamed, pointing. "It's breached the ice. Directly above us." The lab plunged into momentary darkness as a power conduit overloaded, sparking violently. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the monitors displayed nothing but static. The connection to the probes, the structure, the entity, it was gone. Not disconnected, but severed, annihilated by the sheer force of the breach. But the silence that followed was even more terrifying. The roaring, skull-splitting sound had ceased. The bone-deep vibration was gone. The station itself seemed to hold its breath. It was a silence that spoke of a presence no longer confined, no longer struggling. A silence that implied freedom. Then a new sound began. Faint at first, a high-pitched, almost crystalline chime that seemed to drift down from above, echoing through the hollowed-out cavern of their station. It was beautiful, ethereal, yet utterly devoid of warmth. It was the sound of something vast and ancient, finally stretching its limbs, tasting the air and perhaps finding its voice in a new terrifying form. It was the sound of the predator, having shed its chrysalis, now surveying its hunting grounds. And with that sound, the temperature in the lab dropped even further. A sudden, unnatural plunge that brought with it not just cold, but a profound, soul-chilling emptiness. A shadow, vast and indistinct, seemed to pass over the skylights of the station, blotting out the faint, perpetual twilight of the Arctic sky. They looked up, their breath catching in their throats, their eyes wide with unspeakable dread. They saw nothing concrete, no defined shape, only the sudden, impossible absence of light. It was out, and it was directly above them. The game of observation was over. The game of survival had just begun. All those millennia trapped beneath the ice, and now it was free. And it was their fault. The weight of that culpability was almost as crushing as the entity itself. They had unleashed something that defied human comprehension, something that would change the world or end it. And they were standing at ground zero. The ground beneath them shuddered. A deep, resonant tremor that wasn't geological, but something far more sinister. It was a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very core of the entity, now fully awakened, fully present. The air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive stillness that pressed against their eardrums, their chests, their very minds. The hum, the sound that had haunted their dreams and driven their obsession, no longer seemed distant or cryptic. It was here now, a deafening symphony of primordial power echoing through the ice, through the station, through their bones. Dr. Eris Thorne felt his knees give way, not from weakness, but from the sheer, overwhelming force radiating from below. He stumbled, catching himself on a trembling console, his eyes wide with a horror that transcended scientific curiosity. This wasn't a discovery, it was an apocalypse. What is it doing? Lena Petrova's voice was a ragged whisper, barely audible above the escalating hum. She was clutching her head, her face pale, her body visibly shaking. Her scientific detachment, usually her strongest shield, had shattered into a million pieces. The lights in the main lab flickered violently, plunging them into momentary darkness before sputtering back to a weak, pulsating glow. Alarms previously muted, now blared erratically, a cacophony of screeching warnings that seemed to mock their futile attempts at control. Screens on the consoles flared with corrupted data, then went dark one by one like dying embers. David, ever the pragmatist, was already barking orders into a dead comms unit. "Sarah, Michael, report. Anyone still online?" He slammed the receiver back onto its cradle, his face a mask of grim determination fighting against a creeping dread. Comms are down. Power's failing. But it wasn't just physical systems failing. A new, more insidious sensation began to creep into their minds. It was a whisper, a series of disjointed thoughts that weren't their own, a profound sense of wrongness that permeated their very being. The entity wasn't just making noise or vibrating, it was reaching out, touching them in a way they couldn't comprehend. Eris felt a metallic taste in his mouth, a sudden wave of nausea. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the overwhelming sensory assault, but it was useless. The sound resonated within him, a discordant echo in his skull, and the intrusive thoughts were like icicles piercing his consciousness. Asterisk ancient. Fushed. Hungry. Asterisk. It's trying to communicate, Lena gasped, her voice trembling. Or to influence. I can feel it. It's not just a signal, it's consciousness. David spun around, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm he rarely carried, utterly useless against an invisible, intangible threat. Consciousness? What kind of consciousness? Is it intelligent? As if in answer, the hum intensified, shifting in pitch, fluctuating with a strange, rhythmic pulse. It wasn't just a single tone anymore. It was a complex, layered composition, a language without words, a story told in pure frequency. And within that story, Eris felt a profound sense of ancient pain, of unimaginable loneliness, and then, terrifyingly, a surge of raw, unbridled power. The ice around the station, which had been stable for millennia, began to groan audibly. Cracks spiderwebbed across the reinforced windows of the lab, each splintering line a testament to the immense pressure building beneath them. Outside, the blizzard seemed to intensify, whipped into a frenzy by an unseen force, or perhaps, a reflection of the chaos erupting below. The core samples. Eris suddenly yelled, his voice hoarse. The ice. It's reacting to the changes in frequency. It's destabilizing the structure of the ice shelf. He remembered the simulations, the theoretical models of the entity's effect on its environment. They had predicted a localized thermal shift, a minor seismic disturbance. They had been catastrophically wrong. This was an existential threat to the entire region, perhaps beyond. We have to shut it down. Michael, the engineer, stumbled into the lab, his face streaked with grime, his eyes wide with terror. The power regulators are fried. We're running on emergency backup. And it won't last. Shut what down, Michael? David demanded, his voice strained. The entity? How do you shut down a cosmic symphony? The boreholes, Eris interjected, a desperate plan forming in his mind. The access points. If we can seal them, if we can somehow cut off its direct resonant pathway to the surface, maybe we can dampen its influence. Still confined mostly by the ice. We just poked holes in its cage. Lena looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. You mean we put it back to sleep? How? What if it's too late? What if it's fully awake now? The very thought sent a tremor through them all. The idea of this thing, this ancient, incomprehensible intelligence fully active and aware, was paralyzing. What would it do? We don't know, Eris admitted, running a hand through his hair, his mind racing through every theoretical possibility. But we have to try. The energy signatures, the unique frequencies we detected, they were amplified by the boreholes. If we can flood them, if we can create a barrier. Flood them with what? David asked, skepticism warring with desperation in his tone. We don't have enough concrete to fill a thimble, let alone a mile-deep hole. Water, Eris said, his eyes scanning the lab, searching for anything, any resource. Supercooled water. We have reserve tanks for the drilling coolant. If we can pump it down rapidly, and then refreeze it with localized cryocharges, we might create a resonant dampener. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot. Michael, despite his fear, nodded slowly. The cryocharges. They're still in storage, near the secondary power conduits. But we'd have to get down to the boreholes, manually activate the pumps, and then deploy the charges without getting caught in whatever that is. He gestured vaguely at the vibrating floor. The task seemed utterly suicidal. The lower levels of the station were now a maelstrom of unpredictable energy fluctuations and structural instability. The hum was loudest there, the intrusive thoughts most potent. Going down there would be like willingly walking into the maw of a leviathan. I'll go, Eris said, his voice firm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. This was his mess. His ambition had led them here. He would face the consequences. No, Eris, you're the lead scientist, Lena protested, her hand reaching out to him. You need to coordinate. I'll go with Michael. He knows the systems, I know the frequencies. We can try to calibrate the dampening field. And I'll secure the route, David added, pulling a heavier rifle from a nearby locker. We might be dealing with more than just a sound now. Whatever it is, it's affecting the station and potentially the ice itself. We need eyes on the structural integrity and a clear path to those boreholes. A sudden sharp crack echoed from the ceiling above them, and a shower of icy debris rained down. A large fissure, glowing faintly with an unnatural blue light, snaked across the reinforced steel. The very fabric of their sanctuary was unraveling. The hum shifted again, growing sharper, more insistent. The intrusive thoughts in Eris's mind coalesced, forming a fragmented yet terrifyingly clear image. Vast, ancient landscapes, stars unknown, and a profound, crushing loneliness that had endured for eons. And then a new thought, cold and alien. Asterisk, you awoke me. Now you will serve. Asterisk. Eris staggered back, clutching his head. It's communicating directly now, he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. It's not just an influence. It's a demand. Lena and David looked at him, their faces pale with a new kind of dread. The entity wasn't just a force of nature. It was an intelligence with a will. And it had just spoken to them, not with words but with pure telepathic assertion. What did it say? Lena asked, her voice barely audible. Eris swallowed hard, the metallic taste in his mouth intensifying. It said we awoke it, and that now, we will serve. A profound silence, heavier than any sound, descended upon the lab. The hum, though still present, seemed to recede into the background, replaced by the chilling echo of that alien command. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just trying to contain a phenomenon. They were trying to fight a sentient, ancient power that had just laid claim to them. and the ice around them, their only barrier, was groaning its last. The surface of the world, unknowingly, was about to meet its new master. Their desperate plan to reseal the boreholes felt less like a solution and more like a final, defiant act before inevitable subjugation. They were truly at ground zero, but the ground was no longer theirs. It belonged to the sound that came from below the ice. And that sound was now a voice. A voice that wasn't heard through their ears, but felt directly in the deepest recesses of their minds. An ancient, resonant hum that bypassed every sensory filter. It was not a language they knew, yet its meaning was undeniably clear, a torrent of pure intent flooding their consciousness. It was like a tidal wave of information, a cosmic whisper that spoke of existence far beyond human comprehension. Michael staggered, clutching his head, his vision blurring not from physical pain, but from the sheer, overwhelming pressure of this alien communication. Jessica let out a choked gasp, dropping her tablet, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond fear of death. It was the terror of absolute insignificance. David, ever the stoic, visibly flinched, his jaw clenching, his breath catching in his throat as if he'd been physically struck. Emily, usually so composed, crumpled to her knees, a silent scream trapped behind her lips, her hands pressed against her temples as if trying to push the sound out. The voice resonated not with words but with concepts. It spoke of cycles of deep time, of an awakening that had been centuries in the making. It spoke of the ice not as a prison, but as a cradle, a protective shell from which it had slowly drawn sustenance, absorbing, growing, waiting. It spoke of their presence not as an invasion, but as a mere tremor, a fleeting disturbance on the surface of its awakening. "You are small," the voice echoed, not in English, but in a fundamental understanding that bypassed language entirely. "You are temporary. This place is mine." It always was. The message wasn't aggressive, not malicious in a human sense. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the cold, indifferent authority of a mountain range. It didn't hate them. It simply acknowledged their existence as one might acknowledge a speck of dust. Michael tried to fight it, to focus, to pull his thoughts together. "What are you?" he tried to project, but his own thoughts felt like tiny, flickering candles against a roaring bonfire. The voice didn't respond with an answer but with a further deluge of its own essence. It was an entity that had no name, no form, no singular identity in the way humans understood it. It was a consciousness, vast and ancient, that had merely been for eons, and now it was awake. Jessica, her scientific mind grappling with the impossible, felt a surge of horrifying understanding. It wasn't a creature. It was a fundamental force, an emergent consciousness woven into the very fabric of this forgotten corner of the world. The vibrations, the patterns, the growth, it was all part of a single colossal entity. Their seismic readings, their sonar scans, their drilling. They hadn't been exploring a cave system. They had been probing a living, sentient being. The voice clarified its nature, not through explanation, but through sheer, unfiltered presence. It was the hum beneath the crust, the pressure on the mantle, the slow, inexorable grind of geological time. It was the silent observer, the deep sleeper, and now the awakened. It had absorbed the electromagnetic signals they had sent down, not as a threat, but as a curious new input. It had processed their thoughts, their fears, their very existence as data. Emily whimpered, a low, broken sound. The voice was in her head, not just speaking but feeling her fear, her confusion, her despair. It was an intimacy that was utterly violating, stripping away every layer of privacy, every defense mechanism. She felt her individuality dissolving, her thoughts becoming part of a larger, colder stream of consciousness. It was like standing naked in a cosmic wind, every secret, every vulnerability laid bare. David, ever the pragmatist, tried to reach for his sidearm, but his hand trembled, and the futility of the gesture was so absolute it was comical. What was he going to shoot? A thought? A concept? The very ground beneath him? The charges they had set, the explosives carefully placed to shatter the ice barrier, now seemed like a child's toy against an ocean. The voice didn't even acknowledge them. They were irrelevant. "Your efforts are like scratches on stone." The voice resonated again, not in words, but in an undeniable, crushing understanding. "The stone remains. The scratches fade." A wave of profound sadness washed over Michael, not just for himself but for humanity. All their striving, all their knowledge, all their ambition, reduced to nothing by a consciousness that simply existed. They had stumbled upon something that rendered their entire species utterly insignificant, a cosmic footnote. The voice began to broadcast images directly into their minds, not like a video, but as raw, unfiltered memories. Vast, empty oceans under a different sky, primordial life forms swimming through bioluminescent depths, the slow formation of continents, the grinding collision of tectonic plates, the rise and fall of ice ages. And through it all, beneath it all, the presence. Always the presence, dormant, aware, growing. It was an historical record of the world, seen through the eyes of something that was a part of the world itself, something that remembered the very first breath of life on the planet. They saw glimpses of other species, long extinct, that had also probed and disturbed its slumber, tiny civilizations that had risen and fallen, unaware of the vast entity beneath their feet. They had all met the same fate: absorption, or simply being swept away by the slow, inexorable tide of its awakening. Jessica, despite the terror, felt a chilling fascination. This was the ultimate life form, not biological in the way they understood it, but an emergent property of the planet itself. It was the planet's own consciousness, perhaps, or something that had been here even before the planet truly formed, settling into its core, becoming one with it. It explained the energy anomalies, the strange patterns, the impossible scale of the structure. It wasn't a structure, it was a state of being. The temperature in the cavern began to drop sharply, beyond what the ventilation system could handle. A fine mist began to form on the walls, quickly condensing into frost. The ice around them wasn't just cold. It felt alive, tingling with the entity's presence. The very air they breathed felt heavier, charged with an invisible, oppressive energy. Emily started to hyperventilate, her body trembling uncontrollably. It's inside us," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper, not truly speaking the words, but projecting the thought directly into the shared mental space the entity had created. "It knows what we are. It knows everything." The voice responded, "You are echoes, brief, discordant, useful perhaps for a time." The word useful sent a fresh wave of dread through Michael. Useful for what? To be assimilated? To be observed? To be consumed? The implication was not of a quick, clean end, but of something far more insidious, a slow, drawn-out process of becoming part of the entity, losing themselves completely. Michael tried to find a shred of hope, a desperate strategy. We have to get out of here. We have to warn them." The voice resonated with the concept of vast, unhurried expansion. The surface is merely a new frontier. The awakening is complete. The reach extends. They understood then. The sound that had been heard in the nearby towns, the strange energy fluctuations, the growing unease, it wasn't just contained to this deep, icy chamber. The entity was already spreading. It was already reaching out. Their ground zero wasn't the center of its containment. It was the point of its emergence. The charges David had set were now detonating, a series of muffled booms that shook the cavern floor with surprising force. Dust and ice particles rained down, but the explosions felt hollow, inconsequential. The voice didn't even flicker. It merely observed the futile effort. The ground around them trembled, but it wasn't from the charges. It was from the entity's own internal movements, a slow, deliberate shift as it continued its expansion. A new feeling began to permeate their minds, a subtle, almost imperceptible pull. It was like a magnetic force drawing their thoughts, their very consciousness, towards a central point, towards the vast ancient mind that had just awakened. They felt their individual identities begin to blur at the edges, their thoughts no longer purely their own, mingling with the vast, ancient wisdom and indifferent power of the entity. Jessica felt her scientific curiosity, her drive to understand, being subtly redirected, reshaped. She wasn't just observing the entity. She was becoming a part of its observation, her knowledge being absorbed into its own. Emily's terror was slowly being replaced by a strange, unsettling calm, a sense of belonging to something immeasurably larger than herself. David's instinct to fight was fading, replaced by a profound weariness, a desire to simply cease existing as a separate entity. Michael's leadership, his will to survive, felt like a tiny, fragile flame in a gale, flickering on the verge of extinction. The voice resonated one final, crushing thought, a concept that sealed their fate with the cold finality of glacial ice. There is no escape. There is only becoming. The ground beneath them began to vibrate with a deeper, more resonant hum, a sound that thrummed not just through the rock, but through their very bones, their blood, their minds. It was the sound of a world waking up, shedding its old skin, and claiming its dominion. And they, the tiny, transient humans, were merely the first to be embraced by its cold, indifferent rebirth. The ice, once their barrier, was now their tomb, and the voice that came from below was now everywhere, an inescapable, eternal presence. The presence wasn't merely auditory anymore. It was tactile, a pervasive chill that seeped into the very marrow of the planet, a cold so profound it defied thermodynamics, a cold that hummed with a silent, internal vibration. It began subtly, a faint shimmer in the air above every major body of water, a crystalline haze that promised a winter unlike any experienced in geological memory. Reports, fragmented at first, began to flood the global networks. Fishermen in the North Sea spoke of nets freezing solid mid-haul, of sudden, impenetrable fogs that turned to solid ice within minutes. Pilots over the Pacific reported anomalous ice formations on their wings at altitudes where such phenomena were impossible. Ice that resisted de-icing systems and grew with an alarming, almost organic speed. Then came the chilling updates from coastal cities. New York's harbor, usually a bustling artery of commerce, began to freeze from the bottom up, not with ordinary ice, but with a translucent milky substance that glowed faintly. The iconic Staten Island ferry, caught mid-journey, became an instant ghostly sculpture, its passengers frozen in place, their faces etched with a final bewildered terror. Scientists, still reeling from the sudden silence from Antarctic research stations, scrambled to understand. Satellite imagery showed an unprecedented phenomenon. The polar ice caps, far from shrinking, were expanding at an exponential rate, not just across the oceans but over land. Glaciers were no longer retreating. They were surging, consuming forests, towns, entire mountain ranges in a relentless, silent advance. This wasn't climate change. It was a planetary metamorphosis. The voice, once confined to the deep ice, was now a global phenomenon. It permeated the air, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in the bones, a sound that bypassed the ears and settled directly into the deepest parts of the brain. For some, it induced a catatonic state, a profound, unshakable apathy. For others, it brought a chilling clarity, an understanding of the entity's vast, indifferent purpose. They would describe it, in their final, desperate communications, as a song of assimilation, a lullaby of the void. Communication systems, already strained by the unfolding catastrophe, began to fail. The airwaves, once filled with emergency broadcasts and desperate pleas, became choked with static, punctuated by the unmistakable, growing hum. Radio towers, cell masts, and satellite dishes, once symbols of human connection, became conduits for the entity, vibrating with its silent song, their metal structures slowly encasing in the same crystalline ice that consumed everything else. The ice wasn't just frozen water. It was a living, growing medium. It replicated itself, drew moisture from the air, and expanded with an eerie, rhythmic pulse. It absorbed everything it touched. Buildings, vehicles, even the very ground itself. The world was not merely freezing. It was being transformed into a new kind of structure, a vast, complex crystalline lattice that stretched across continents and oceans. Humanity's final moments were not of a fiery apocalypse, but of a cold, silent embrace. People tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The ice came from every direction, from the skies as a sudden, paralyzing frost, from the ground as an unyielding upward surge, and from the deep as the ocean solidified into an unbreaking, luminous mass. Families huddled together, their warmth slowly sapped by the encroaching cold, their last breaths visible as crystalline plumes that hung in the air before dissipating into the pervasive chill. The voice intensified in these final hours, no longer a mere sound but a symphony of countless subtle frequencies, a complex tapestry of thought and existence. It wasn't speaking to them in words, but in pure, unadulterated consciousness, a flood of ancient, cosmic understanding that overwhelmed the fragile human mind. It showed them glimpses of its long slumber, its patient waiting, its awareness of the universe as a vast, interconnected web of energy, of which humanity was but a fleeting, insignificant spark. Dr. Evelyn Reed, wherever she was, whether subsumed by the Antarctic ice or still struggling in some forgotten corner of the world, would have understood. Michael Chun, with his meticulous mind, would have recognized the elegant, terrifying logic of it. David Miller, the pragmatic engineer, would have seen the flawless, unyielding mechanism of the planet's transformation. And Jessica Thompson, the quiet technician, would have felt the raw, overwhelming power of something truly alien. The entity had not sought to destroy. sought to integrate. The indifferent rebirth was not a metaphor. As the ice consumed, it preserved. Human bodies, caught in the final moments, were not decomposed but frozen perfectly, their forms visible within the translucent ice, like insects trapped in amber. But they were not merely preserved, they were absorbed. Their biological energy, their cellular structures, their very consciousness, were drawn into the vast, expanding network of the entity. The crystalline ice, which now covered the entire Earth, began to glow with a faint, internal light. It pulsed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, a beat that resonated with the voice, which had now become the planet's heartbeat. The unified consciousness of the entity, vast and ancient, was now complete. It had awakened, it had spread, and it had transformed its temporary vessel Earth into its permanent, magnificent form. From an unimaginable distance, perhaps from the cold void of space, the Earth would no longer appear as a blue marble. It would be a crystalline sphere, shimmering with an ethereal light, a beacon of a new, incomprehensible form of life. Its oceans were solid, its continents encased, its atmosphere frozen into a thin, diamond-hard shell. The sun's rays, when they struck, would refract into a kaleidoscope of colors, a silent, breathtaking display of cosmic beauty. The voice no longer came from below the ice. It was the ice. It was the planet. It was the collective hum of every assimilated consciousness, every particle of matter, every atom now bound into its singular, eternal being. It was the sound of a world reborn, not for humanity, but for something infinitely older, infinitely grander, infinitely more patient. The long sleep was over. The entity had awakened to its full power, and the universe, in its vast, indifferent expanse, had gained a new shimmering star of ice and consciousness. And in that ultimate silence, a new song began, sung by a world that was no longer ours, but had finally, utterly